Looks like.
Chris, are you there? Your line should be unmuted now.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Great.
Oh, good.
Hi, Chris. You had a question, and if you could share that with the group, and then we'll hopefully be able to give you a little bit of guidance.
Okay. My question was more in how to reinvigorate our internal group. We've got the tools, the data we have, but we seem to have lost the support administratively and clinically. So it was more how to rejuvenate that part of stuff than actually any new tools.
Okay, so you guys have set up some key performance indicators and we're working towards it, and then because we've been involved with the project for quite a bit, people seem to have lost focus and interest?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask you, what was one of your key performance indicators or one of the things you were really looking at?
We had been looking at no-show rates.
Mm-hmm.
We had been looking at ratios of billable services to paid hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a lot of other things that were coming into play in terms of putting centralized scheduling into effect. Just trying to do a lot of things that would increase numbers and increase revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
We certainly have collected the data, certainly had done individual productivity numbers for clinicians, but from a management point of view, I don't supervise the clinicians. I don't have any impact on that. So
Mm-hmm.
to try to use the data to show where things need to change to become, for the clinic to become more viable, really
Sure.
has kind of gone more on close to deaf ears.
Gotcha. Well, one of the things I would ask is, what kind of recognition does a clinician get for meeting their productivity standards?
There was one luncheon out with the
Mm-hmm.
administrator.
Sure.
So some things were almost not. We're not even. In some ways, we're not even. They fight the productivity numbers.
Okay.
So they're not even accepting the data.
Like they don't even seem realistic, or that the numbers don't seem realistic to them, or they completely disagree that the numbers are wrong?
They disagree the numbers are wrong, or they, part of what we've been trying to do too is to create some change as to not having as many meetings, not having as many things that pull from productivity. So
Sure.
we've been trying to do a little bit of that, but folks are pretty much fighting that they can't do more.
Mm-hmm.
When looking at the no-show rates, looking at scheduling practices would help them to see that they could.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to continue to educate the clinicians and the clinical supervisors and managers about the importance of productivity and what does it mean for them individually. What does a clinician working in one of your clinics need to hit per day in order to meet productivity, and help them understand why. What we do at our clinics is, and I think it's really great you took everybody out for lunch, and that's a big grand gesture, and I don't know that we can do that on a consistent basis. So we've done a couple things related to productivity because it's so important. When we first kind of started rolling out the process, the entire administrative executive team went to each site and explained to everybody, not only the clinicians but the support staff, this is why we're making the change and this is what the change means. My responsibility as Managing Director of Clinical Operations, my responsibility was then to go to the clinicians and say, listen, this is what you need to do a day. So at the end of the month, you need to have 93 weighted units, let's say. So in a given day, you need to have approximately 5 weighted units a day. What does that mean? It means this many individuals at 45 minutes, this many individuals at 30 minutes, and if you were to do an assessment, that's how you would get there. We also chose to be very transparent related to people's productivity. Anyone in the entire agency can go in and look at the site productivity for any site and also the individual clinician's productivity. And it really helps for people who are a little bit competitive. And I think it also helps the team kind of understand why it's so important, and then really look to the people who are able to hit their productivity and ask what are they doing different, and ask them to kind of mentor or explain to the team what they do a little bit different that allows them to hit productivity. And then lastly, we get our numbers at the end of every month, you know, beginning of the next month. For everybody who hits productivity, every single month they get some little token thing from me, and I don't say it's from me, it's realistically from the agency. I spend probably less than $20 a month on these things that I give people. So if they hit their productivity, you would get one. This month it is going to be, it's individually wrapped lifesavers in a little, you know, fancied up bag with a tie on it that says, thank you, you're a real lifesaver. And those little thank yous greatly impact and increase people's productivity, because now they want to earn that. And then they're like, did you get this? Did you get that? Did you get one? Did you earn one this month? And I always try to focus on the clinical piece, because our clinicians are in the field because they want to help people. And so we all know that we have to stay in business to be able to help people, but I always talk about and try to focus on, really it's about increasing the quality of our clinical care. That's why we do these things. And like I said, those little tokens really make a huge difference to people. Also, try to really create a nice team cohesive environment. When the end of the first quarter, what I did is I sent to every person in the agency who is connected to clinic at all. So it's not only the clinicians and everybody who works in clinic, but we have a care coordination department, and they send and refer people to my clinic. I have the finance people, and I basically did about 4 short paragraphs and said, this is where we ended last year. This is what our productivity goal is for this year. This is all the hard work we've been doing to get there, and this is where we end at the quarter. And everybody really appreciated that, and I think it helps create a team environment, not only with the clinicians or the supervisors, but also with the person who schedules all the trainings for all of my clinicians, and the person who makes sure that the payroll is taken care of. So they get an understanding of why it's important about why we do what we do. And those type of things might be helpful for you to try to get people like back on board.
Okay, it's food for thought. I do appreciate taking the time to share what's worked for you.
And then you may want to kind of reconvene like a little group maybe of clinicians, of the clinical supervisors, of people from the other key personnel departments that you need to figure out a work group about how we can go about making sure that this priority remains a priority and doesn't kind of fall to the wayside.
Okie doke.
Elizabeth, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, I think you've hit on a lot of key points. And you know, Chris, you know, let us know if you know, after thinking about it, if you have follow-up questions, or you know, keep us posted on how it goes.
Yeah, you know, again for this one, we've got data and financial here for the meeting. So it's the people that aren't here are the ones that need to hear what you just said.
Right.
So we've got to, you know, try to motivate the supervisors there to motivate the staff, and that's where we're having some difficulty.
Struggling. Yeah. I'm going to assume that you've probably scheduled meetings with the supervisors and the top administrators to help people really understand where you are fiscally and what is going to happen if you don't institute the changes that they're supposed to be doing. And I think part of that sometimes happens, unfortunately, when sometimes the clinic, because they start doing some of the changes, but it's not enough, and then, you know, somebody chooses to leave a clinical position and we decide not to fill it because we can't afford to. And I think conversations like that are really helpful with people. And that would even go for the supervisors. I mean, the reality is everybody working in clinic and not-for-profit, we're doing it because we really want to help people, but very few of us don't need a job as well. And so I think really helping people understand how those two things play might be helpful for you. And I wonder what the president or the top exec in your agency feels about the fact that you've suggested and they're supposed to be making some positive changes so you can stay alive, basically, and continue to provide services, but it's not being followed through on, and it doesn't make sense to wait to the end of the year to realize you're in the hole $200,000. And so you may want to try to recruit that person to help them understand, and maybe that would help the supervisors of the clinic understand really that it is very important.
Agreed.
And they're uncomfortable discussions with people. You know, I'll have a clinician who hits 95%, and she says, that's really great. And I say, well, the only thing is, can I pay you 95% of your salary? And then she looks at me like I'm really weird and, you know, started talking about really far off things. And I said, that's the same kind of thing. We pay your salary based on the productivity. And so 95 is good and you're making progress, but it's not enough. If you said to your mortgage company or your landlord, my mortgage is $1,000, I can only give you $800, what would they say to you? Well, you better figure out where you're getting the $200 from. And I try to have those conversations with people as well to kind of make it more real world and to understand. And then I always talk about like the COPS money and that kind of thing. And kind of half in jest, I say, you know, I refer to that kind of as like free money. There is no more of that money, really. We need to be able to support ourselves and help people understand that and kind of try to break it down. Although I'm responsible for the oversight of 12 different clinics, I'm not great at math or numbers, but if you tell me, you know what, call your car company, say you have a $400 a month car payment, you're only going to pay them $300, what are they going to say to you? And what I'm going to say is, they're going to tell me, you better go find $100. And so I really try to break it down like that, so people can understand, because I can't fix a $200,000 problem in November, but if we're falling off track, we can fix little problems as we go, and that's kind of the conversations I try to have with people. I don't know if that's helpful for you or not.
Yep, it is.
Great. I'm wondering, do we have any other questions on the line?
It doesn't sound like we do, but what I would be willing to put out there is if somebody did have a question related to how do you figure out a key performance indicator and they needed some assistance in the process, how do you figure out what to measure if you're trying to increase productivity or build units, how do you do that? I would be more than willing to, you could send me what you're interested in doing and I could send an email back and we could I would offer that up. I think that might be helpful for people trying to figure out the key performance indicators.
Absolutely. And I'm just looking, the way folks can let us know if you do have a question would just be to raise your hand, and then we can unmute your line.
Elizabeth, there's one question that came in, maybe actually, and he's raised his hand as well.
Okay, great. Evelyn, can you unmute? It looks like Gordon Dunham's line. And Justine, do you want to read the question that's come through while we're unmuting the line?
Sure. So Gordon's question's around, it would be helpful if we can compare our productivity in relation to other clinics. And Gordon, I believe you're unmuted now, so maybe you want to clarify on that a little bit. Thank you.
Sure. One of the things that I have difficulty in getting across to our execs is that we do fairly well. However, it's very difficult to find anyone to benchmark against. For example, our social worker goals are 0.74 per hour, which amounts to about 6 people per day. And I know that we're doing well compared to other clinics in our geographical area, but I'm wondering how we're doing compared to clinics across the state.
And in terms of sort of productivity hours and hours of the paid to bill?
Productivity in itself. In other words, what are their productivity goals as compared to 0.74 per hour for the social workers, 2.5 for the psychiatrist, 2.25 per hour for the nurse practitioners?
So I think this question has come up a couple of times, and Julie, feel free to jump in as well. I think it depends on your benchmarking tool and where you've set the goals for yourself. And so in terms of your benchmarking tool and in terms of the numbers that you need to reach, you know, it's hard to compare because people have set up their systems differently.
Right, but what you run into when you're trying to set productivity goals independently of your own clinic dynamics is when you look to try to benchmark what is an appropriate number of people to set as a goal for social workers to see, try and find it. You go on the internet, you Google your brains out, and you still can't find a reasonable benchmark or any benchmark that's been established over time.
Didn't the Lloyds say about they were looking at, and I could be a little bit, a percent or two up or down with this figure, but really looking at about 60%
of the time, yeah. Like if you go and if you try to research how many people per hour is it reasonable for a nurse practitioner to see in primary care, you can find it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't find it for psychiatry, or at least I haven't been able to this point. And if you're trying to find it for social workers, better luck yet.
Right.
Just a question.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think, you know, it's easier in primary care because they have been used to weighted units and getting paid different amounts, and really looking at that piece and the fiscal piece, whereas I think in mental health clinic we're working towards that, and we don't have the history or background like the primary care doctors had. And it can vary so greatly about what kind of productivity you need. Like I said, we have 12 clinics. I have a clinic in Wyoming County, and the Medicaid percent there is maybe about 45–50%. And then I have a clinic in the city of Buffalo, and the Medicaid penetration rate there is 92%. Right. So realistically, my city of Buffalo, if I wanted to do it like that, has to give less productivity, but you kind of have to balance it out. So there's a lot of different factors about what you need to look at, and I think that's why the benchmarking tool is important. To use that and figure out what do you need to break even.
Right, I see where you're coming from. We aim at the highest productivity we can reach regardless of the mixture. We run about a third Medicaid, another third Medicaid managed care, and then last third Blue Cross, Blue Shields, things of that nature, private services. Right. I see what you're saying. We aim for the top and hope we capture whatever we can.
Right.
I think next week, now I'm not sure if this will get specifically to what you're looking for, but next week I think is the presentation on where folks are at and the data they've submitted to us. And
sorry.
Go ahead. Is that Justine?
Yes, it's on the 12th. It is coming up, though.
Okay, so that will be the opportunity to look at, in terms of the data that's been submitted to CTAC through the benchmarking tool and through the other information you've submitted. We'll be presenting the data book, and we'll be sending out the your letter ID code so that you'll know which agency you are, and you can benchmark yourself against your colleague agencies.
That'd be great.
And
Please jump in.
Yeah, just to add on, and I think one of the variables that has been of interest, and that we'll get to specifically what you're talking about, is that the ratio of billable hours to paid hours as indicated in the benchmarking tools we received. So hopefully that should give you a sense. Now I'll say that I think the difficulty that we found from past experience of having clinics compare that ratio against each other is that it assumes that you use, or ideally everyone would use weighted units, and ideally everyone would use the same calculation, but people have slightly different unit weightings still at this point, and people leave slightly different calculations. So it won't become 100% of a benchmark comparison like you might like, but it'll probably be something that will at least help to get you a better sense than you have right now, hopefully.
Right, because I know that county clinics have a higher rate and we do a higher base rate, and downstate's different than upstate, and et cetera, et cetera. But at least it gives us some kind of a reference point.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
And I think the idea as well is if you did submit data, for those who, we can't provide them to those who did not submit it, unfortunately, because we want to respect the kind of the financial privacy, but we are going to be also giving additional charts for those who submitted that kind of have more in-depth breakdowns. So again, hopefully some of those analyses will be helpful as well.
Good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great. Are there any other questions on the line?
So we did get a comment from Maria Rios, but Maria, I don't know if you saw I chatted you. I'm not quite sure what you were referring to, because I think she said that she would like us to review again something that we were talking about earlier. So Maria, I don't know if you would like to kind of clarify via phone. And Evelyn, if you can perhaps mute Gordon and unmute Maria, please.
Hello?
Great. It sounds, is that like Maria has been unmuted?
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yes, great.
Hi, Maria.
Oh, great. Hi, how are you? So you had been talking about just kind of reviewing once again how to go about getting the target areas to work on, because we're also looking at our no-show rate.
Okay, so you're, again, if you can sort of clarify your question a little bit more, that'd be helpful.
I think Julie was talking about how at her clinic they had gone about trying to see what they were going to be targeting in order to improve. And in the training, the last training that we had, that's what we were going through in order to help with, using the benchmark tool and helping identify the, the top target areas that you want to show some improvement on to kind of help the bottom line. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about if you guys can just kind of review, like, how is it that you want to, figure out what is it that you're going to be working on first.
Okay, so you basically want to increase revenue, and one of the things you've identified that's a barrier is a high no-show rate, correct?
Correct, especially during the summer. As we're entering, as we've just started the summer, which is a big concern.
Absolutely. So now that you've kind of identified, one of the first steps would be do you know what the agency no-show rate or the clinic no-show rate is as of today?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have that broken down by clinician as well?
No, that's what we're doing now.
Okay. So that would be one of the first big steps, because you're going to typically see when you're looking at productivity and no-shows, individuals who are able to meet and exceed their productivity goals oftentimes, not all the time, oftentimes have a lower no-show rate. Right. I have an idea about what that's about. I think part of that could be related to engagement and clinical skill. Right. And so when you're able to break it down, then what you would really want to do is figure out what is your baseline, what do you want to get to, okay? So if your current no-show rate is 30% and you want to get to 10%, you have to start thinking about some things that you need to do as an agency. That's policy and procedure-wise, and also some things that you probably want to do clinically, and that's going to be woven into the policy and procedure, and some trainings that might be helpful to staff who continue to struggle with the no-show rate.
Okay.
So, basically you're going to want to figure out where are you, where do you need to get to, and then what are some things you could do administratively that'll support you decreasing the no-show rate. Like we put into effect, we have an attendance policy now. And we literally have a no-show policy, and if a client misses 2 appointments in a row or has a pattern of missed appointments, that case needs to be discussed in supervision between the clinician and the clinical supervisor. And the clinician needs to explain why is it important clinically and why is it clinically appropriate to keep the individual open and receiving services if he or she is not attending appointments as scheduled. We also send out, for every missed appointment for individual session, we send out a letter to the client. And there's two options. Either you missed today's appointment, and if they are in jeopardy or being considered for discharge due to their attendance patterns, that's spelled out on the letter, and the client has 10 days to call us. And we have an electronic medical record, and so we put in the electronic medical record a code so we can run a report that at the end of the month we'll see how many of those no-show letters we sent out, and it helps the clinician to know who they need to look at, and also helps us administratively to make sure that we're looking at those cases with the missed appointments.
Okay. Great.
And I think one of the questions you were asking is how do you set up, how do you identify where to start? Was that one of your questions, or?
No, I mean, because through our reporting and looking at the productivity, we tracked it very closely. So just based on the targets, we know who is falling short of it,
right.
Just like who's been exceeding it. But I have seen, that among a couple of the clinicians, this seems to be ongoing. So when you put other things aside, like if you've had to transfer a whole bunch of clients over to, say to a new clinician, how many of these cases are actually going to take? I mean, you look at all the factors and kind of give it a certain period of time. But once you hit that period of time and we're still looking at a low percentage, or you're not at what is expected, then we start asking more questions and trying to, problem solve around it and figure it out.
Right.
So this has been very helpful.
Good.
Great. Great. Okay. Other questions? Oh, I see Gordon Dunham's hand is raised. I'm not sure if that's a new question. Why don't we unmute the line?
Hello?
Hi, Gordon. Great.
Hi. No, you've already answered it.
Okay. Wanted to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? And or feel free to identify strategies you've used that you think might be helpful to others on the call. Okay. It looks like we don't have any further questions. Justine, have any come through on chat?
Nope, none that I can see on my end.
Julie, did you want to add any additional thoughts?
Well, I just think it's important for everybody to recognize all of the hard work that they've been doing and the staff has been doing to make the changes. It's certainly not easy, and it can be challenging, and we're here as a resource. So if you have any questions that pop up after this, feel free to send us an email, and we'll get back to
you. Nicely put, absolutely. Seconded. And I think if we don't have any other questions or comments, that we're about ready to close this out. I just don't want to close it out early if we do have any last minute questions or comments. Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending today, and as Julie said, for just all your hard work in this area. And if any questions or comments do come up after the call, again, please do feel free to email us. And we look forward to hearing from you and to your thoughts and any questions. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.